All right, let's get right into it. As a social psychologist, I get to look at the world as this giant, fascinating experiment in human behavior. And honestly, there are very few case studies as perfect as the one we're going to break down today, the psychological machine behind a billion-dollar brand. So let's just start with this pretty bold statement right here. Now, I don't see this as just some marketing slogan. To me, this is a psychological diagnosis. The big question we're going to unravel in this explainer is why this statement is so true. Why do we make these buying decisions that feel so logical, but are actually being driven by something way, way deeper?
Today, we're pulling back the curtain. We're going to deconstruct the exact code that influences your choices, often without you having a clue. And you're definitely going to want to stick around because toward the end, I'm going to give you a really powerful psychological tool that can help you take back the controls.
So to understand what's really going on here, we have to start with the fundamental playbook of persuasion. It turns out, when you boil it all down, there are really only two ways to change a person's mind.
Okay, so on the one hand, you have the central route. This is your logical brain doing the work. You're weighing the facts, comparing the data, really thinking things through. Think about buying a car. You research safety ratings, fuel efficiency. That's the central route. But then there's the peripheral route. I like to call this the salesman's shortcut. It completely bypasses all that logic and instead relies on these superficial cues, like a celebrity telling you something is great, or just how much you happen to like the person selling it.
The whole reason the peripheral route works is because our brains are designed to be efficient. You could even say a little lazy. To save energy, we rely on these things called heuristics. They're basically mental shortcuts for making snap judgments. So instead of analyzing a product's ingredients, your brain just goes, hey, a famous person uses it, it must be good. It's totally automatic, effortless.
And this quote just illustrates the strategy perfectly. Marketers know your brain has these little pre-programmed tapes inside. They don't have to waste time convincing you with a bunch of facts. They just have to find the right trigger to hit play. So what's the main trigger feature we're talking about here? It's not just fame. It's actually something much more biological.
So let's talk about that biological trigger. The main thing that flips our brains on switch for buying isn't something we learn from culture. It's something we are literally born with. We're talking about a very specific set of hardwired signals. It's called the baby face bias, and we have decades of research showing that humans have this incredibly intense, completely subconscious preference for facial features that remind us of an infant. This is not a conscious choice, it's a deep-seated instinct. So what are these features? Well, you've got large, round eyes, a small nose, and a small chin, a large forehead. From an evolutionary point of view, these features signal youth, health, and even vulnerability. And that triggers our instinct to protect and, crucially, to trust. When our brain sees these cues, it doesn't just register a face, it registers a biological signal that basically screams honesty. And that perception completely bypasses our rational mind.
Okay, so this biological bias becomes the foundation for what is a really powerful and, let's be honest, a pretty manipulative psychological trap. It's how a simple, subconscious preference gets turned into unshakable brand loyalty.
This is all leveraged through what psychologists call the Triad of Trust. First, you've got authority. By being positioned as a beauty expert, she automatically becomes an authority figure in our minds. Second, honesty. Well, those babyface features have already flipped our trust switch, creating that mental shortcut. And third, you've got likability. This is the magic bullet. When we like someone, we are willing to believe almost anything they tell us, no questions asked.
But it gets even deeper. This trust leads to something we call automatic mimicry, or the chameleon effect. We are literally wired by evolution to imitate people we see as having high status. So the urge isn't just to buy what she's selling. It's this subconscious drive to look like her, to adopt her style, to become some version of her.
And here's where the real danger lies. This whole cycle creates what we call a money self. Your sense of self-worth gets all tangled up in external things, having the right lipstick, the right look. But the problem is, these values aren't actually yours. They're foisted on you by brands. And since trends are always changing, this identity is built to fail. It creates a version of you that is always hungry and can never truly be satisfied.
Okay, so that's the trap. But I promised you a way out. And now we get to the most important part of this whole analysis, the psychological tool you can actually use to break the code and perform a kind of neural reset on these influences. The entire key is to shift your mindset.
See, most of us operate as a judge, constantly handing down verdicts on ourselves. I look bad, or I need this product to feel good about myself. The solution is to become a craftsperson. A craftsperson doesn't judge who they are, they just calmly evaluate the work in front of them. And in this case, that work is your own thought process.
So here's the 4-step process. Step 1. Just notice the urge when it pops up. Don't act on it, don't judge it, just observe it. Step 2. You consciously make the shift from that judge mindset to the craftsperson. Step 3. Isolate the specific belief that's driving the urge. What is it really telling you? Probably something like, if I buy this lipstick, I'll feel more confident. And finally, step 4. You apply the crucial test.
And that test all comes down to this one single question. You ask yourself, if I allow myself to believe this thought, that I need this thing to be valuable, for the next 24 hours, what kind of behaviors will that actually lead to? Is it going to lead to real, lasting well-being? Or is it going to lead to more insecurity, more comparison, and, a lighter wallet? This test forces you to look at the long-term impact of a very fleeting peripheral urge. What this little exercise does is it helps you realize that true value, I'm talking real confidence, real security, it's an internal quality. It's not something you can add to a shopping cart. All the peripheral cues, the celebrity faces, the slick ads, it's all just noise. You are the awareness behind that consumer self, and you get to decide what you listen to. The second you can actually see the code, the baby-face bias, the peripheral route, the mimicry trap, the illusion starts to lose all its power. You're not a mindless participant anymore, you're an informed observer. So the question I'll leave you with is this. Now that you can see it, which digital illusion, which one of those consumer urges will you choose to take a closer look at and maybe even delete first?